right, so I'm Wally McClure, and we're going to talk about location-based services and mapping with, it says iOS. We're also going to do Android, okay? So hopefully I can get there. We've got a relatively short amount of time. I think we technically have 1 hour, but the way it works is really we're going to have the next session is in here at 2:30, so I've got to cut off at basically the 45-minute point. So just be aware of that. So I just want to mention for one thing, everybody go to the Scott Hanselman keynote yesterday? Scott's a pretty good presenter, isn't he? He's a great guy. He's a comedian. I, however, am kind of like the opposite of Scott. I'm very stiff. And I just want to show you, just to show you how stiff I am. I know Scott, I saw him when he got here out in the hall. I've seen him over the years. We've actually worked on some stuff. And I came out of the bathroom and saw him and said, "Oh, hey, Scott, how's it going? Hey, Wally McClure." I always do this. And, everybody kind of around him started to snicker. It's like, "Oh, what's going on here?" And they said, Scott looks at me and says, "Well, Wally, everybody knows you're stiff." And I said, as you walked out of the restroom, "Watch, Wally's going to come over here and he's going to put out his hand. He's going to say, 'Hi, I'm Wally McClure.'" Okay? So I'm a little too stiff. That's my one, funny Wally joke for the day. Here's just a little bit of information about me. I wrote some of these mono books, which would now be Xamarin.iOS and Xamarin.android. And I've got my phone number listed here. That's actually my mobile number. One of the things that I like to do is when I come to an event, I like to interact with a lot of people. But unfortunately, due to some time constraints, I can't actually do that as well at this event. So if you've got a question on location-based services, mapping, something like that, and you're like, "Man, that Wally guy talked about this and I didn't quite understand it," literally, feel free to call me, okay? This will come right to me. But the only thing I ask is you said, "Hey, I was in your session," because if not, I'll go, "Who in the world are you?" Okay, so just, kind of identify yourself as coming from here. We're going to talk about basically 4 things. Location-based services in general. We're going to talk about Apple Maps, what Apple provides for us out of the box in iOS 6. We're going to do some mapping with Android. And then I'm going to talk about, but we're just not going to have time for Google Maps for iOS SDK. However, I've got a ton of sample code for you guys. I've got 8 different projects. And one of those projects is Google Maps with for iOS SDK example, okay? So the first thing is, when we talk about location and mapping, we ultimately need to know where the user is. And that falls into the question of how do we determine location? And with these mobile devices are great, right? Everybody loves them, Everyone in here probably has 5 in their pocket, right? Okay, what's the one problem with them? Anybody see a power cord on them? Okay, so we have to be really careful about the power that we use, right? So one of the things that burns the battery out faster than anything else is determining location. So we're going to have to be very careful about that, all right? There's 3 different ways to determine location in a device. You can use the GPS on the device, all right? And the GPS is really good because it's going to be really, really accurate for us, okay? We can literally use it to determine the difference between, where I'm standing at here and where Nick Landry is standing at the back of the room, okay? So we can get that amount of difference. But the problem with that is the power, okay? GPS uses the power, uses a lot of power on the device. So I want to be careful there. What else can we do? How else can we determine location? We can determine location via cell phone tower triangulation, okay? Not quite as accurate, but much less power needy, okay? Downside to it is that not as accurate. For example, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. My office is in West Knoxville. And whenever I do a location lookup on where I'm at, and I don't care if it's on my Android device or if it's on my iPhone, I end up being told I'm 1.5 miles to the west of me, okay? So that may be okay, depending upon the application's needs, okay? So if I need to know that I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, or I'm in Austin, Texas, that's fine. If I need to know I'm at a certain address, a very specific address, then cell tower triangulation may not be the best way to do it, okay? And so we want to be good citizens on the device, because if your wife says, hey, I tried out your application and my battery died after 3 hours, what do you think somebody who doesn't love you is going to respond, okay? You're not going to get a positive response if you put an application out and kill the battery in 3 or 4 hours, okay? So we need to think about this stuff as we're going through and building our apps, okay? So let's get into Apple Maps, okay? And there's two namespaces that you're gonna be predominantly interested in. There's MapKit, which is the Apple framework for mapping, and we're gonna look at something predominantly called MK Map View. Then there's also Core Location. And Core Location is Apple's namespace. It's their framework for providing location services, okay? And you're gonna see a couple of different classes in there. We'll talk about Core Location Manager. We'll also talk about some points, CO Location Coordinate. You'll see some things like that. So just want to kind of prepare you for what you're going to see. All right. So here's a map, okay? What do we need to know to go display a map in the iOS world? So we need to know something about MapKit, obviously. And then we need to know a few other things. We need to know some latitude, longitude. We need to know where we're going to go center the map. We need to know how much area do we need to go display. What's the region that we're going to go display, and make sure it's inside that map. Anybody done Google Maps? Familiar with Google Maps? Zoom level? Okay. That region mechanism is basically very analogous to the zoom level. Okay. Now, one thing, well, I'll show you when I get to the code. Okay. So now we got some properties that we want to set on our maps. Okay. We've got our region, kind of mentioned that. We got our center. We got the type of map that we want to put. So you can see, for example, I got a couple of screenshots here. One uses kind of the standard look. The other is going to uses a different look. We've got some points in here. Also, we can determine if we want to put the map out, show the user's location. Okay. If you're wondering what these points are, you'll see here in a little bit. It's basically, I did a search for golf businesses in the area and just put some points down associated with the latitudes and longitudes. Okay? So talk for a minute about how are we going to put points on a map. Okay? And in the iOS world, basically we're going to use annotation. We're going to create a class that is going to inherit from a MK annotation. We'll be able to set what's the specific point that we want to put, title, other kinds of information, very similar. We can also do overlays through them. Okay, we'll see what this code looks like here in a minute. Other things that we can do, we'll be able to obviously add them, remove them. Those are some of our important pieces. So we've got overlays that we can put on maps. This gentleman here had some overlays. He was displaying in the web, is that right? Some KML information. So we can do something, I don't want to say it's 100% the same, but we can do something similar in iOS where we can put some shading on the map. And I'm going to show, we're going to put a circle on. We're going to be able to add it, remove it. We can do custom shapes as well, but this is just going to be a circle. Let's see. Whoops, did I? Shapes, colors. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. That's our example. That's going to be what our example looks like. Sorry about that. What we've got there is a point in New York City, and I've got a 5-kilometer radius around that point. It's a little grayscale circle, okay? Now, one of the other things that we want to do users ever move the maps around? Some applications they don't, but probably most users move their maps around. We want to be able to track that kind of information, don't we? Maybe give them additional information. Say we had our map with the golf points, and they said, hey, I'm in Austin. Let's see what I can do up in Dallas. Could drag it down. We want to detect that kind of change, and we can do that. That's done via delegate, okay? Everybody heard about delegates for iOS? Okay, so we're going to do that here. We're going to inherit from an MK map view delegate. By the way, does anybody think that the people who developed iOS used to be COBOL programmers in a former life? Anybody besides me? Okay, yeah. So we can detect when that changes, okay? So now I've kind of talked about a few things. I want to switch over to some code and show you a few items, all right? So I'm all about the code, okay? So I'm probably doing some of this wrong, but that's never stopped me before. So this should be, if I've got this correct. And by the way, I'm running on code that's currently in the alpha channel. So if something breaks, I'm going to blame somebody else, okay? Please forgive. This should run on the simulator, hopefully. Everybody cross their fingers, bada bing, bada boom, okay? So here we are. We've got our location. I've put a pin on it, all right? And then also, notice that I've got my 5-kilometer overlay, okay? And now, I want to show you something. Notice I'm moving, and my pin is moving, and my overlay is moving, okay? So I'm detecting that map change. I've still got my user's location down here, though, okay? So nothing sneaky happening. Now, if I remember right, that's actually where the map is where the center of the map currently is, okay? And I'll talk more about what that means, but I did at least want to show it while I'm here. It's something called reverse geocoding, okay? Anybody familiar with geocoding? I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. Okay. Now, let's take a look at this code. Hopefully everybody can see it. Oops. All right, so this is a fairly simple app. What I've got, so I'm inside my view did load, okay? And the first thing I'm going to do is I want to get my current location. So I talked about the core location manager just for a moment. I'm instantiating it. I'm setting what's my desired accuracy. And then I'm going to start updating my location, okay? Now, my next piece is, remember I talked about the map changing, okay? And I had to set up a delegate for that. That's what's happening right here. And this map view delegate method is actually something that I created, okay? So just to take a look at it real quick. This is my delegate. Notice that I've inherited from MK map view delegate. And then I have overridden a few methods. And in this case, I'm overriding the region changed, okay? And so when I override it, I'm going to do a couple of things, but one of the things is I'm going to communicate back to a method that's in my app delegate. Sorry, that's not my app delegate, is it? Well, I'm going to communicate back, and I'm going to change the location of the map. Okay? Yep, it's not my app delegate, sorry. It's my view controller. Alrighty, now, so what happens? A couple of things. I need to get my location. So remember I was talking about the core location manager. So here's an event. And I'm going to get as one of my event args a coordinate that comes back. That's the center. I'm sorry, that's not the center. That is where I'm currently at. And then I'm going to go, and it ends up that handle map is going to say it's going to put it's going to put a point on the map and put the centered the centered overlay on. But here's the other something else that I want to show off. Right here. When I get updates from Core Location Manager, I'm getting them on a background thread. Okay? So I have to, if I want to go talk to something that's on the UI, I have to make sure that I'm doing that on the main thread. And in this case, I just called invoke on main thread. All right? Now, handle map. Mapit is the name of my MK map view. It is the name of the outlet that I've created. Okay? So that is, this is in my view controller, and Mapit is just the name of my map. It's the name of my outlet. I'll bring it up here in Xcode for you real quick. So maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I'm going to crash here. Maybe that wasn't a good idea. Sorry about that. Here we go. Just so you can see it. Here's my MK map view, and it's still processing. But here's my outlet. And my outlet happens to be called Mapit. Okay? All right. Oop. Now, in this method of handle map, all it's going to do is it's going to remove any annotations that are currently on the map. And in this case, it will add the circle annotation in. Okay? And also it will add the point. All right? Now, I talked about the annotation. This is my annotation object, which, if by the way you're wondering, I, in a former life, was a COBOL programmer, so I have very uninteresting programming class names. And so this is object annotation. It's my class. And all I'm doing is basically setting the location, the title, and the subtitle. Okay? So let's see, let me move to my next example. Okay, so this is just a little bit more complicated example, and as you can see, I do have some Google Maps stuff in here. And you can pardon the horrible UI here, but boom, I got some points on there. Notice the points don't look that standard, do they? If you're wondering, I'm doing a search on golf, and those are the that is a picture of the driver that I actually play. Okay, so that's why I use that. If I click on it, I'm going to get some information. And so apparently from here, 37 meters away from whatever location this is Gloves Wolf Golf. Okay? And you're probably wondering, how did I get that calculation? iOS actually has a method that says, I've got a point. What's the distance between this point and another point that I pass in? Okay? It does all that kind of hard work for you. By the way, I said I wouldn't show this, but I'll show it real quick, just so that you know it works. Boom. Same thing in Google Maps. All right? Huh? Oh. Okay. And if you're wondering how this is all set up, I actually didn't set this up in Xcode. I actually created my controls and then added them as a subview. Let's see, if I want to, let's see. Here's the big code that from this section that I want to show. Remember how I've got basically a custom pin that's sitting there? This is the code that I did it in, all right? There's two things you can actually do. First thing is you can customize an existing pin. Okay, so by default, I believe it comes down in red, but maybe you want it to come down in like purple or green or something else. You can do that, and you can do that in this section that's commented out. Or if you want to have the really cool code, you can go here and do this. All this stuff here. Now you may be wondering, I'm not going to take credit for this code. You guys know Craig, Concept Dev? You guys know him? He did some of the training. He actually did those calculations. So, give him a pat on the back because that's some good stuff there. All right. Let's see. Anything else in here that's interesting? What? Yes. Yeah. I believe it just loads it. It just takes any kind of UI image. My actual UI image is from this file right here. So, all right. Let's see, from current slide. Okay, so any quick questions on Apple Maps? Quick ones? Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the location and the change events, all right? So you saw that I used start location changes, all right? That's typically going to use the GPS on the device, all right? GPS uses a lot of power, so you want to be careful when you use it. One of the things that I did in my code is after I got my location the first time, I just turned it off. Okay, so I said stop location change, stop listening for location changes. All right. Now Apple has released, and this came with iOS 4, start monitoring significant location changes. That is a mouthful, isn't it? Okay, but what that does, that is a much more power efficient mechanism to listen for location changes. And it actually doesn't just use cell phone or cell tower triangulation. It actually listens for network changes. Okay? So if you walk into an area that's got Wi-Fi, or you walk out of an area and there's some kind of change, that change is actually going to be registered if you're listening here. Okay? If you change cell towers, that change is going to get registered there. All right? You can also do other things with the location manager. You can listen for heading changes. Okay? So I'm going this direction. Why am I going now over in this direction? Okay? You can listen for those changes. You'll also get other altitude information, a bunch of things. But this is the key thing, and going back to that first slide that I did, you want to be really careful when you're getting location information, okay? So if you get your location changes, if you don't need them anymore, don't listen for them anymore, all right? If listening for network changes is good enough for your application, then use that over the start location changes, okay? Because, the last thing you want is when you test that application and your wife says, my phone died after 3 hours. That is just not a good thing. And by the way, I was at my office one day. The reason why I keep bringing that up, I was at my office one day, and she called me at noon and said, why is my phone dead? You started testing this yesterday. I took it off the charger this morning, and it's dead. Why is it dead? So, that's one of those things I really pay a lot of attention to now. Okay? Now, what happens if your application is not currently running and you want to listen for location changes? Excuse me. You want to know when you changed some network, okay? You want to know some kind of location change. You can do that, okay? It's going to require, anybody doing iOS 3 development still? By supporting it? Okay, if not, then you don't need to worry about this, okay? For iOS 4 and later, you can actually do some background processing. You will register inside your info.plist file that you want to listen for changes. And when there is some kind of network change, iOS will go, it will start up your application with some parameters. Inside of, I believe, finish launching, you will process those parameters. Because I believe there's an NS dictionary that comes in. Does that sound familiar? There's an NS dictionary that comes in. And you can go in and you can look in the dictionary that when you start and see if you started because of something like this. Okay? So that allows you to do background processing. All right? Anybody, if you do Android development, you can think of this as kind of the poor man's service. Okay? You also have the ability to do region monitoring, okay? So what's region monitoring? Let's say you've got a 16-year-old daughter, which I do, and you want to make sure that you want to know when she leaves high school, which I do, okay? You can do that with region monitoring. You can set up a region, and that could be the center of her high school, and you can say, I want to know when she leaves, a 1 kilometer radius on that, okay? And that's all, you can do that in iOS. So all you're really doing is you're just checking when a device crosses a border, all right? You get information that says, hey, the device went in, the device went out, all right? Yes? What? She let me manage her home. Her phone. She does not know that this is on her phone. So, okay. So she just knows that because I bought the phones, that I get to do with them as I please. So when I ask for them, she knows she has to give it. And she goes, Dad, I don't wanna. All right. So. Once again, more tips. This is a very constant theme with me. Turn off your location services. Use the significant change location. Use lower resolution whenever possible. All this is obviously going to depend on what is the need for your application. If it's important to know a 10-meter change, well, guess what? It's important to know a 10-meter change. You've got to do it. But if it's not necessary, then talk to whoever your end client is and say, hey, if we switch over to the monitoring significant location changes, we can get much better response battery-wise. All right? All right, so you've got geocoding support, okay? Right, done some geocoding, turn addresses into latitude, longitudes, and go it the other way around. So you've got support for that in here as well. All right. Here's just a little example that I wrote. Anybody doing iOS 4 only? Okay, so we've got four geocoding support in iOS 5. We're good there. All right. Here's just a little quick example, and this is in your samples. I literally just type in Austin, Texas, and I put a point on it. It's very good in that it's asynchronous. All right, and we're going to use the CL geocoder. Okay. We can do reverse geocoding as well. Okay, so that's reverse geocoding. Basically says take my latitude, take my longitude, turn that into an address. All right. We've also got that built into iOS. It is also asynchronous. By the way, both forward and reverse geocoding require a network connection. Okay. If you're in a parking lot surrounded by concrete, it's probably not going to work. Okay. So let me switch over real quick to just an example so you can see the code. I'm already running short on my time, so I'm trying to hurry. Geocoding, where's my... Oh, it's not in my recent, so hold on here. Dropbox, projects, evolve, region monitoring, iOS geocoding. There we go. So this is just one of my geocoding examples. Austin, Texas, boom, we've got our point. Now just to show what this takes. Oops. Stuck here in my code. Okay, let's see, I search. Oh, went the wrong way here, hold on. All right, so here's my code. And this is the stuff that's really important. I've got a CL geocoder class I instantiate, and I say geocode this address. And then here's a callback. Okay, it's pretty simple stuff. Here's my completion handler. Okay, and so I'm just going to process that. All right. Now, I want to go the other way. Oh, that's my Android one. Geocoding, magnetic sensors. Well, that's where we just were. I thought I had all this in here, but I'm already running short on time. So let me go on. Because I got to get to all the Android stuff as well. Okay. All right. So, who has not heard of all the Apple iOS map jokes? Okay. So, I know you're sitting there saying, this is all great, Wally, but we know that Apple Maps has problems. It's got to go to special ed. There is a Google Maps for iOS SDK, and you can use it. And there are actually Xamarin.iOS bindings available. You can go to the Xamarin component store, pull them down, and they work. And in fact, what I found is that from the time of an update to the Google Maps for iOS to getting new bindings is about 24 hours. So, because the last bindings, I believe, came out on a Friday, and they put the associated iOS bindings up I think it was Saturday. Okay, so pretty good turnaround time. What all does it take to use? Okay, it takes a Google Maps key. So you've got to have an account with Google. You go get a key, you go get your bindings, you're going to add in your Google Maps namespace, and then you're also going to apply your key inside your app delegate. Okay? Also, you've got to make sure that the bundles that you set in your project matches the bundle that you assign to it in your key with Google. Okay? So entirely possible, does work. I don't think that what I've seen so far of the Google Maps, it's not quite as advanced as Apple Maps yet, but I've got a feeling that they're going to come on strong there. All right? Now, so let's think about Android, okay? We pretty much got the exact same things that we can do in Android that we've got in iOS, all right? It's just different, okay? And that you're doing the same kind of stuff, but it's just, names are different. So, don't be too concerned about that. Anybody done map view programming in Android? Anybody? Okay. Map view is deprecated now. Okay? So what that means, if you currently have a key that works with map view, it should keep working. I mean, Google may change that at some time, but you're not going to be able to start, I guess, new projects with it. All right? So from here on out, you're going to use the map fragment. All right? Now, everybody remember what version of Android supports fragments? Exactly. But what does the map fragment support? Anybody know? 2.1 and later. So did you guys hear about the Android support library? Support for that in Mono for Android, or Xamarin.Android, sorry. You're going to be using that underneath the covers here. Okay? Let's see. Let's switch. Okay, yeah. So what are my options if I want to go do some mapping in Android? I've got some options. I can use, my native maps application. So I could actually go and I can shell out, for lack of a better term, to the built-in Maps app. Anybody use Street View? Heard of Street View? So if you want to, you could give your users the effect of knowing, hey, I'm at this location, here's what you should see around you. They can look at it, they can say, yes, this is accurate, no it isn't, and they would use Street View for that, all right? Like I said, you can use the map activity, but or the map view, that's deprecated, okay? So you want to think about how am I going to use the map fragments. And here's a map fragment running on Android 2.3 on a physical device. By the way, I don't think I mentioned it in here, but I just want to mention it to you guys. The map fragment requires Google Play services. Has anybody got nobody's got Google Play services running on their emulator, okay? I've tried some hack stuff. I've never been able to make it work right. So you're going to have an actual physical device to get the map fragments working, all right? So a couple of things to mention. You'll see, note that fragments have a slightly different life cycle than an activity. So just be aware of that. You'll see some stuff in onResume, and you'll probably think, why is this not up in like an onCreate or something like that? It's just because of the differences in the life cycle. You'll set options on your Google Map. You can also, and I think this is really cool, I think the camera options. So basically the idea is that if I've got a map, in Apple Maps, you're pretty much looking down. With the camera, you can change how you're looking at your location, okay? And that's kind of cool. And you can do all other standard things, zoom in, zoom out. There's some other pieces, location pieces in Android that are a little bit different. There's a location manager. A location manager is going to be basically your interface into your location services. It's going to allow you to track, or what's your current location as your location changes, so you can track the movement. It's going to interact with location providers. Location providers are what's physically underneath the covers, okay? And location providers may be a little bit different depending on what device. My HTC Evo may have one set of location providers, and your Samsung S4 may have a slightly different set, all right? So one of the questions, first thing that comes up, where am I? All right? So how do you answer that in Android? First off, you have to get permission to ask where you are, all right? So you're going to have in your Android manifest a permission statement that's going to allow you to go get location, all right? Obviously, which provider are you going to use? There's an interface that you're going to go implement, iLocation Listener. It's got 4 methods that you'll go implement. In this case, you're going to see them inside of an activity. You'll want to start listening, and you're also going to want to stop listening, okay? Stop listening is something that you'll do as needed for your application. There's a criteria object, okay? We don't necessarily know what's in every device out there, all right? So we've got to go, we want the system to really tell us what's the best location provider, what's, for our needs. We're going to specify some criteria, and then we're going to let the system tell us what is the provider that's going to give us the best results given these criteria, all right? So first issue, where am I, okay? And like I said, we're going to implement iLocation Listener. We're going to have some methods to implement. Because I'm running a little short on time, I'm going to skip through this example. You guys have it in the source code I'm going to show the link to here at the end. Okay? One thing to remember, all our data is once again delivered in the background. Okay? So that means if we want to go touch the UI, we're going to need to call run on UI thread in Android. We can do proximity checks as well. Okay, proximity checks are basically your region monitoring. All right, so we saw that in iOS. We can do geocoding. All right, so here's a geocode example. In this case, I just took, what's my address? I'm sorry, what's my location? So this is a reverse geocoding example. And I got my latitude and longitude, and then I went back and got from that, what's the address? Notice that I'm getting a list of results back, okay? And so, as you can, I don't know how well you can see it there, but as I go through the list, I get different locations. I happen to be at 118 Doorwood Road in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I believe you get a very close address there, and then you get progressively more general addresses, and I think at the end it probably just says United States, okay? But that's probably like the 8th item that comes back, all right? If we want to go hand off to the built-in Maps application, we can do that. We're going to do it through an intent, and then we're going to pass various parameters in, the latitude, longitude, the zoom level, some query information. That capability is there. If we want to go get our street view, basically we're going to do the same kind of thing. We're going to go create an intent. We're going to pass some data in. This is a picture via Google Maps Street View of the outside of the hotel. So this is the front door to the hotel. I did this the other day. And we've also got some routing capabilities, okay? Now, I know we're at end of time, but I do want to show at least one of my examples here on Android, all right? So bear with me. Let's see, Android Maps, where's my example? Maps, map routes, Android Maps, here we go. Okay, so what we've got here, just so you can see from a setup standpoint, we've got a project that you're going to want to include in. That's what the Google Play Services project is. There's some special setup. Xamarin's got that documented. Okay, so I'm not going to try and repeat them here. Then we're going to come into our activity. Remember I said we're going to implement iLocation Listener. Okay. There are 4 methods that it requires to get our location. Here's the one that we're the most interested in. Okay. By the way, I'm sharing my information from this one activity in the. So I'm in an activity. I go up to my Android application class that I've created, and I share my information that way, so I don't have to hand it via the intent. Okay. So that's what this is doing here. It's basically handing this up to the application. And then each one of my activities is going to read this in. So let's take a look at, you can see the street view here. Here is calling the Maps application. That's this bunch of code right here. Now, here's where I'm going to put some points onto my map and have some markers and those kind of things. Basically, that list of points that I've got for golf, I'm just going to iterate through my list, and then I'm going to add them in here. Okay, so I create an icon, then I create a map option, and then I add my marker to my map. Okay? Any questions on that piece? Okay, let's see. So, okay, let me throw out a question to you guys. Quick vote. Would you rather me finish the slides, which I think slides are kind of boring, or do you want to know how to do routing in Android and iOS? Routing in Android and iOS? Okay, great. Code. Okay. All right. Map routes. Let's see. This is my route. Okay. This is my iOS routes. Okay? So you have to think for a second and switch back to it. Oops. Basically, I'm going to have 2 locations that I'm going to create. Point 1, point 2, my beginning and my end. All right? And I get their latitude and longitude. In this case, I already happen to know what it is because I pre-built this and I cheated. Okay? But I got the latitude and longitude of the White House and the Library of Congress. So I create a couple of MK map placements and some map items. I put them into an array here. Okay? And then I'm going to call mkmapitem.openMaps. This is a new iOS 6 API call. And I hand in that array, I hand in some options, and then iOS is going to load the map with 3 route options for me. Okay? And that's what it did right there. Route 1, Route 2, and Route 3. Okay? Pretty cool stuff? Okay. Now, you see if proximity alerts, region matter. Where's my... Let's see if it's in my solutions. Existing map APIs. Magnetic sensors. Okay. So, last example here. Okay. Who has one of those GPS devices? Anybody still have a GPS device? Okay. So, I looked at this a couple of years ago and I said, okay, how could I basically make my phone a GPS device? What do I want to do? And I said, okay, I want to go and I want to start my application. I'm going to assume that I'm going to start where the phone is. Then I'm going to speak into my phone and tell it my end location. So I'm going to do some voice analysis, okay? And then when that voice analysis comes back, I'm going to hand that to my route, okay? And go to that location from my current location, all right? And this code here will do that, all right? So unfortunately, as I found yesterday, when you try and talk in a loud room, it doesn't work so well. But the other piece of this is this example actually uses magnetic sensors in Android and looks for example, when I would attach this to some kind of magnetic plate. So say like I've got a little plate on my dashboard that I'm going to hold my phone on, like a GPS device. When the phone gets connected to that, when it detects the magnetic field, it's going to stop listening and just assume I'm ready to go. Okay, so it's going to turn all that stuff off. It's going to turn off the iSensor listener. Okay, and it's going to quit listening for location information and do all that. And then it's just going to go to the Maps application and provide the route information. All right? Now, unfortunately, like I said, I don't have the setup for this for here, but here's basically how to set it up. Okay, all right? I don't have an example for it here. So I go in, I start listening for any kind of location updates, and then this method here is where I'm going to do the voice check. Okay? So all that does, it's not really anything special I'm doing. I'm just basically starting another activity, and that's a voice recognition activity that Google provides on my phone. When it comes back, I get what my matches are. Then here, this is where I'm listening on the sensor. I see if the sensor magnitude is above a certain threshold, because there are background magnetic fields everywhere, so I want to make sure that I'm getting a good solid magnetic field. Then here's where basically these three lines, where I create my URL. So I've got my latitude, my longitude, and where I want to go. I create an intent, and then I start that activity. Okay? And so if you have Google Maps set up or something else that's going to listen for that action, then that application will come up and load. If you've got more than one application that will listen for this action, then you get a little chooser that comes up and says, which one of these applications do you want to use? And then that's how you get the routing information. Okay? And since nobody's banging on the door, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my slides then. Hopefully, maybe. Okay, so just want to talk about just a few things that you've got to go through to set up the mapping on Google Maps in Android, the Maps fragment, okay? It's not really complicated because I figure if I can set it up, You guys can, because you're probably smarter than I am, all right? So first thing you're gonna have to do, you're gonna have to go create a key. Depending on what operating system you're running in, the key is in different locations. You can go run this command here, which is a very long one, but thankfully that's provided by Xamarin. Key tool, anybody familiar with key tool? It's just a Java utility. You should get something like that certificate there. You're going to then go take that API key, and you're going to go out to that URL and sign up for the map fragment API. Once you go through, whatever steps you've got to go through at Google, you're going to go and you're going to take some of that information that you get, and you're going to plug this into your Android manifest file. All right? So you're going to take your map key, plug it in. You're also going to have to set up various permissions. You're going to have to say that your application is going to use OpenGL, okay? Because the maps fragment uses OpenGL. All right? So use that. You also have to have internet permission as well. One thing about location. You have to actually ask for location permission. I asked that. Anybody know what the 2 location permissions are in Android? Really great names. Find, course. Okay? Find actually implies course. Okay? They kind of, find basically is going to map to the GPS. Course is going to map to some kind of Wi-Fi change, some kind of network change. So it is roughly analogous to iOS's start monitoring significant location changes. All right? So, summary. Basically, we talked about maps, a lot on maps, obviously, right? We put some points on a map. We did, the overlays, the geocoding. But what's probably the biggest thing that I mentioned all throughout this? And that's the power management, and that's the being the good citizen, okay? If I can leave you with one thought, that is, please be a good citizen on the device. The bottom there is a link, okay? Use that link. You can download my samples and my slides, all right? And it looks like that I'm being chased out now because there's a Xamarin person here. And thanks a lot. If you got any questions, because I know that we're getting a little late on time, feel free to ask me. But I think I've kind of got to clean myself out here, okay? What? Yeah, how about 1 minute? Is that cool? 10 seconds, 15 seconds, something like that? Yes. Okay. That I'm not sure about, but also remember, because you can change you can detect when the map changes, you could handle it yourself also. So there's that capability, Yeah, exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about, yeah. But that's probably something we could check. Anybody else need this? Because I probably need to get my stuff out of here. Sorry about this.